Welcome to what I hope will be an inspiring and also critical dialogue about the value design can have for policy practices. My name is Nynke Tromp. I'm Program Director of PONT and I will be moderating this session today. And it's my birthday. So today's title of the session is called Better Governance by Design. But what do we actually mean when we talk about better? Well, think along. What if we could spend a little less time being caught up in bureaucracy and rigid systems and spend more time listening truly to what people and our planet need? Or what if our policies weren't constantly swayed by headlines and media noise and instead looked ahead and could focus on long-term goals? This was corresponding with the truly listening to people, and this corresponds to looking ahead. Or what if we could spend less time on analyzing, reporting, debating, studying, and we should do that, right? But just a little bit more time on trying out a variety of things and learning what actually makes a difference. Now, these types of governance require new practices. New practices mean that we have to adopt new skills, develop new skills. We might have to learn new language, and we might have to adopt different methodology. And that's what we will discuss today. But new practices don't come automatically. Important point made here is they require also institutional change, because existing practices are institutionalized. They have developed over education. They are installed by rules and agreements and organizational structures. And they embody norms of what we think how a practice should go and what's not allowed. So to simply ask people to change their behavior won't do it. What if I here now at this point would ask you, please stand up and tell me what you think of all of this? Everybody freezes, right? Because this is not the norm. You are not on the stage, you are in the chairs, and the chairs are organized in a way that nobody looks at you. You don't have a microphone. You are not in the script, you have not been announced as part of this program. So everybody paralyzes. So in other words, the behavior I just called for is not institutionalized. It's not staged, it's not supported, and it's not the norm. So simply asking people to change their behavior is not enough. To face the societal challenges we are confronted with today, we have to develop new governance practices, one of which may be public design practice. And today we will discuss the value of this practice, what new skills it may require, and also what institutional change need to happen to support it. We're honored to be joined by someone who leads such institutional change within our government. As the permanent secretary of our Ministry of Education, Culture and Science, give her a warm applause, Loes Mulder. All right, Loes, from your position within our government, what do you see as the value of design?
Well, I think it's the best way to start with the people we are working for. It's a way to start looking at them and hearing what they need, and also the professionals that they are working with, so that we can actually think of things that will work in practice. And sorry for my herfstvakantie English. I always find it slightly awkward to talk English in the Dutch audience and some high esteemed international guests for whom we are all now doing the English thing. But I'm doing my best here. So for me, design means starting with the people you are designing for.
Yeah, connection
and
with society.
And that's something that we as a government are not very good at. We are trying to get better at it, but still a lot of our triggers are the other way around. The most common form in which we work on a proposal is you get a question, you have to respond quickly, You have to check with everybody and then send it to Parliament. But we really want something else, and it's difficult to change that behavior.
Yeah, so moving from outside in instead of from inside out, right?
Yeah.
And what do you hope we as a program PONT can actually set in motion? What are your expectations or hopes?
Well, I hope you can also help design the way we design. Because the way of working in The Hague is so easily the other way around. We have to find new ways in which it's easier to design instead of starting by writing the rules. So I hope you will help us experiment, learn from that, but also find ways in which it becomes much more logical to start with the people we are working for and the professionals they are working with.
So actually helping to change this practice,
Yeah.
this policy practice. Well, thank you. Give her a warm hand.
Oh, well,
And
that was
yeah,
quick.
that was very short. I'm really pleased. You will get back to stage, Loes, after, and then we'll have a slightly longer conversation together with Christian. I'm really pleased to introduce our first keynote speaker, Marco Steinberg. Marco was one of the driving forces behind the Helsinki Design Lab, which ran from 2008 to 2013. And if you ever get the chance, check out the website. It still holds a breadth of knowledge that's still so relevant today. He's the CEO of Snowcone and Haystack, a professor of practice at Aalto University, and also an honorary professor at the TU Delft. Yeah. He advises a wide range of governments around the world. I admire his sharp thinking, his wit, and his sense of humor. I'm genuinely proud to have him here to kick things off. Please give him a warm welcome, Marco Steinberg.
I don't need this. I got this.
Oh, true.
Yeah, but I need
Yeah,
the clicker.
you need the
Thanks,
clicker.
Nynke. All right. So, great pleasure to be here. It's a real honor. Love Holland. Can't understand a word what you guys say, but we have Swedish in Finland, so I confirm today that nej and ja are shared amongst the languages. So I think we can get quite far with those two. All right, I'm going to try to work quite furiously, quick and fast, to outline a little bit of a perspective about institutions and about change. Sometimes I'll be somewhat opinionated or a bit extreme. When I'm extreme, I'm just trying to make a point clearer. The reality is somewhere a bit more moderate sometimes. If some things don't work, we'll just skip and we'll go forward. All right. So let's see if we can get... I had a couple questions for you guys. And I don't know if I'm supposed to go ahead or not. But is it loading something, you think? This is taking too long. All right. Maybe... Can we maybe just skip it then? Okay. Hold on. But I'm supposed to have other buttons here. So anyhow, let me see if you can take your phones out. And if this doesn't work, then we'll just forget we did this, and I'll just ask you manually. Okay. So let me see. Yeah. This is not. Right, you can't see anything, can you? No. See, I need more than 2 buttons up here to do this. So why don't we skip to my first slide? Can you do that? Oh la la. Okay. All right. So why don't you answer this? So you got the QR code. You're on here, right? And then, okay. I'm worried that No Stress and Atomic are competing, but... All right, okay. So this is just to get a little bit in there. So average, that seems fair. But no one's totally cool and no one's atomic. So then if we can go, what I'm going to ask you is a next question on building on this. And think about your answer. Don't look at what other people answer because we don't want you to be conditioned. Can we go to the next question maybe? Here. So what is your stress level when you think about the future of government and public systems in Holland? Okay, here too, everything from atomic to cucumber. And then we should be able to show so we have 98 people, 109. All right. Are you able to show the results? There should be. Me too. There we go. All right. All right. I think it maps, at least on my own. I'm probably more in the atomic camp, and I'll try to make some points about that. But it seems like no one thinks that nothing needs to be done on this. All right, we have 2 more quick questions. So if we go to the next one, and then I think you need to either go to the next or open the question under this. Try going forward. No? No? All right. I'm so sorry. Okay. Thank you, guys. All right. Which of the following best reflects your view of the type of change the government should prioritize? So is it tweaking? Is it more structural stuff? Is it just like, rethinking everything? All right. All right. So we have, I think most people have sort of answered. I guess it's good and bad news. Oh, sorry, I wasn't supposed to go beyond this line here. Sorry. The good news is no one thinks that everything is okay, or very few people think. And sort of, there seems to be consensus in the room that change needs to happen. I guess the bad thing in a certain way is the fact that we're really looking at very fundamental change. It's not tweaking. It's not even sort of structural reform. So I'm happy because this is kind of what I'm going to be talking about. So let's take a quick, fast look into some of these issues. All right. So I think you could take any term that is in the news today. Take heat. Heat is becoming very topical. And I'm just going to focus on Europe. We know that heat is a topic that is becoming, I think, of increasing prominence worldwide. If we look, this is from July, and wildfires burn across Europe after a blistering heat wave. And kind of what's interesting from the article, on Monday, the Greek Labor Ministry ordered businesses to pause working hours when temperatures peak in the afternoon with fines. So we're beginning to see that the rising heat in Europe is not just making people sweat more, but it's having an impact on people's lives, on the economy, and that policies are stepping in to actually safeguard people's well-being. Climate change toll in Europe this summer, thousands of extra deaths. We're beginning to see a significant rise of deaths that are only attributable to heat. And heat's an interesting stressor in society because it cuts across everything, right? So if we think about this term, it will connect everything: energy, security, healthcare, cost, food, water, you name it, right? So one of the things we know, when it gets hot, our productivity at a certain point goes down. We need to take more breaks, we drink more, we go to the bathroom. Then we start making more mistakes when it gets really hot. And it's not a linear relationship, meaning that at a certain point, a couple degrees change may plummet productivity, especially in workshops and other kinds of physical environments, significantly. We know it has a health effect, and then when you combine that with an aging population in Europe, it's becoming very dramatic. In Finland, where I come from, this summer, a hospital had to send nurses to the stores to buy fans because the physical built environment is not built for that kind of climate profile. We're having energy breakdowns. Our railroad tracks, the steel in them is built for a certain temperature range, and now we're going outside, so those are starting to buckle. It is a stressor that is cutting all across everything. And if you look at a government like my own, and I think the Dutch government is pretty similar, may have slightly different words, this is how we're organized. We're organized in a series of tidy boxes, each one responsible for a discrete area of work, and in fact, heat cuts right across them. And as much as we think of this as the government, these are fairly independent organizations that have internal incentives to maintain their budgets and meet their own internal KPIs. And so, is this a system that is built for the cross-functional kind of work that needs to happen? Number one, the answer is no. And number two, is it designed to deliver the creative work that is necessary? Because these are solutions that we don't have answers to yet. There's nothing off the shelf that we can take and implement in society to, in a way, help us prepare for heat. And so when we look at government, really look at it as an instrument. And I think as an instrument, it's designed in a very hierarchical, fragmented, linear, in terms of the logic of the organization, and it's dealing with a world that's very complex, interconnected, ambiguous challenges. And so I think it's this fundamental mismatch which is creating friction. And as the world is becoming more provocative in its questions, and government is becoming less capable of addressing it, then we begin to have a drop in trust, loss in faith, and we're seeing the weak side of government. And so I think there is an urgency to rethink what this model is. I've been showing this graph probably for 25 years, but I like it because it represents the idea of progress. This is income adjusted for inflation. So if you were back in the 1300s, that relative to what you make today. I mean, here we see how societies have benefited from industrial revolution, right? And if we think of it as a play in 3 acts, the first act was really an act where nothing happened from a GDP perspective. You could go 6,000 years back and it's pretty flatlined. And then this moment around 1750, we introduced a completely new logic of doing, of organizing society, which was the Industrial Revolution, and you can see the hockey stick that begins to happen. And I think as we enter Act 3, which is where we are today, is that we need to realize that we've built this legacy, the idea of good governance, the idea of good systems, of a good bureaucracy that was built on the backside of the hockey stick, and that logic may not prepare us very well for the kind of world that we're facing today, right? You guys are a water country, but if we look at Vietnam, I was doing some work with the Vietnamese government. While we were working, there was a science report that came out and adjusted the water level predictions, and by 2050, half the country's underwater. That's in 24 years from now. So how do we the question for the government is, how do you make sure that in 24 years, half your population is not living underwater? The scale, the speed, and the scope of that change is something we haven't addressed before, right? And so we need to create the mechanisms that are capable of delivering something that we haven't delivered before. So my very simple thesis about this hockey stick, and I'll just park it on the side then, is that in the Industrial Revolution to today, we've developed an idea of progress and the systems and institutions that govern that progress that in some way has provided a lot of benefit, but now is at a point of diminishing returns. And it was based on trial and error. We did some things, some people died, so then we improved the regulations or the ways of doing. I would argue, if we just take Vietnam as an example, and I think we could benchmark a lot of other things that are happening in the next few decades, that we need to do the same delta of change in society, but within a much shorter period of time. And so it suggests that we don't have the trial and error approach or the luxury of trial and error. We need to, in the next probably decade or two, have a hit a bullseye on things. So this already suggests that we need to begin to think in quite radical terms. I think the Slido poll suggests that you're thinking like that. I think we need to calibrate what that actually sort of means. I realize the video is a bit long because I was going to trim it, but let's watch this. I don't know how many people have seen Mr. Fox. It's a story of a family of foxes, but they behave like humans. I wanted to get to a point in about a minute, but let's just enjoy about a minute and a half of Clooney and company.
I don't want to live in a hole anymore. It makes me feel poor.
We are poor, but we're happy.
Comme ci, comme ça. Anyway, the views are better above ground. Honey, I'm 7 non-Fox years old now. My father died at 7.5. I don't want to live in a hole anymore, and I'm going to do something about it. Well, I'm off. Have a good day, my darlings.
All right. So what I like about this is then there's his friend, and anytime there is a problem, this is what happens, right? His friend, the possum, just freezes. And what this story, in a certain way, is about a cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, these foxes are very human, they're very civilized, they're comme ci, comme ça, you know, very sophisticated. And on the other hand, they have this inalienable, inescapable foxness about them. And I think that is exactly what we're sort of dealing with, is that there is a cognitive dissonance when we think about government, right? So this is a psychological conflict resulting from simultaneously held incongruous beliefs and attitudes, right? They're non-compatible. And I like this last bit here is, thus cognitive dissonance creates a motivational drive in an individual to reduce the dissonance. So when we realize that how we think about things is in conflict with either another belief system and we can't resolve it, then we have a tendency to try to sort of eliminate that stressor, right? I think a lot of politics is striving for that. A lot of the populism is the idea that don't worry, we can return to a time that existed in the past, right? So we're seeing a lot of those phenomena, politically speaking. But I think we also see it within the mechanism of government itself. So I'm going to share a bit about my own government. I don't work in government anymore, but I put together, we've been, for the last 20 years, trying to do healthcare reform, and we're not quite there, right? And so half our population would be underwater waiting for healthcare, so to speak. Right? So this is, in 2024, government expenditures in healthcare. And if this was a business, and we would say, well, how much do you invest in research and development? How much do you invest in creating new products, new services, new logics, right? In government, people will claim, oh, yes, we do that, but when you press them hard, it's generally, no, we don't do that. So this is, then yellow is how much the government is spending on innovating this system. Okay, so it's this percentage. And this is actually diminishing or it's being let's say it's being pressured by many things. One of them is that while this is happening, our healthcare costs are ballooning. Our tax base is diminishing because our population is getting older and people aren't working as much. We're having growing, and I mean not just marginally, but exponential growth in security spending because of our neighbor Russia and all of that's happening. And so at the same moment, we're saying that we need to completely reform healthcare, and yet we're dedicating a diminishing amount of an extraordinarily small pot of money to do that, right? This is cognitive dissonance, but let's push this a little bit further. So this is at scale. So if we were to draw this, just to give you a bit of a sense, okay? And then if you look where the money actually goes, actually, first of all, half the money goes to servers, because what's called innovation is just updating IT systems. So it's not really rethinking the institutions that deliver healthcare in themselves. And then you look where it goes. Most of this money is splintered into grants of 10 to 100,000 euros, so very small ones, that are given at the organizational level, right? So a hospital will get for one department a little bit of money to do something. When you start splintering money like that, there is very small opportunity to have anything that's transformative. It's probably going to be money that is going to help improve the lower boxes of the system, not rethink the system as a whole, right? So this is the cognitive dissonance I'm talking about. We want healthcare reform. We recognize there's a problem. We recognize it's dire. We resource it in all the ways that are contrary to what we're speaking about. So I think it raises the question of efficiency. Is this an efficient way of working? Right? And a lot of people would say that this current system of government is not aligned with its purpose. We're not making decisions, mobilizing resources in ways that serves our citizenry best. And I think, unfortunately, we fail to leverage the growing anti-establishment sentiment as a force for good. Right? People are getting more and more disillusioned. These would be people that we could work with because they want improvement. We want improvement. We're all innovators. We're all in this. But forces have come in with populist ideas and they really have hijacked this discontent for other purposes. Right? So we see Doge in the US, right? Is it really about efficiency? There's no stated claim about what that notion of efficiency is. It's actually a notion of just dismantling government, right? And so when we allow for these discontent to be hijacked, then we can apply them to the wrong kinds of purposes, right? And I've always been irked by this idea that we need to have smaller government. I don't think that's the purpose here. We need smarter government, right? So it's not about reducing all the things that we did yesterday. It's about figuring out what are the new things that we need to do. Right? And these challenges, whether it's working with heat or rethinking healthcare, are really complex challenges, and they're fundamentally creative challenges. They're asking us to do things that don't exist, to create, to make connections in ways that we hadn't thought about before. And these systems that we operate in, I think we need to recognize, are not just technical issues. Like healthcare frequently takes us to a technical conversation, but they're first and foremost ideological ones. All right. So frequently I try to posit this idea of ideology and technical solutions along the spectrum. Let me explain it just very briefly. On this side here is you're trying to think about what's possible. What's the realm of the possible? What are all the things that influence health, for example? It's everything from food to economic well-being to all kinds of issues. And you begin to realize that that's a very broad scope of issues that are coming together. On the other end of the spectrum, you have technical solutions. Are we buying beds for retirement homes? Do we have COVID masks? How are we procuring them? Those are very specific things. And I think we need to be able to operate on both ends of the spectrum as designers. We've frequently been at the solution end, trying to make existing services more pleasant. If we do that without reconceptualizing what health needs, we might be making the wrong services just more acceptable. We may actually be entrenching flawed practices. Right? And if we work only over here, then we might have great new concepts, but no changes in the real world. Right? So let me explain this with a very simple analogy. Finland. So if we think about Finland from a historical perspective, this is how, for most of my history, we've been. We don't exist. Right? We're so far north, we're not even on the map, and then if we, God forbid, dare to be on the map, somebody put text on top of us. Right? And this logic is a logic that still exists in my family. Every summer we have, or let's say spring, we have this conversation where somebody in my family will say, hey, what should we do this summer? Should we go to Europe? And then I have to remind them that we are in Europe, okay? So our national airline, Finnair, understood that actually we can reconceptualize this. And they realized this, that the world's a sphere. And you can roll it around however you want, and you can put Finland in the center. It's not necessarily on the edge or off the map. And then the question is the center of what? It's the center between Europe and Asia. And so it began to have a strategy where it built air traffic and moved people across this pole because it's the shortest route because it goes across the North Pole, right? So it does that as opposed to going around a fat edge. Now, think about if we hadn't made this conceptual change, what would have happened? Finnair would have been a small regional airline that serves the few towns that we have, and we would have then decided to serve that mission, that our technical solution is to buy small planes and have a local staff. When we changed the concept, then we had to actually do something completely different. We had to buy big planes, and we had to hire an international global workforce. We had to hire people in China and Japan because we need to connect with those people. Two completely different sets of technical solutions that stem out of a shift in the conceptual framing of this. Right? This is the other thing that's happening. And I bring the US not because the US is some sort of freak, because to some degree sometimes it appears that way, but I think we need to think of the US as actually exhibiting the same behaviors as exist in Europe, but just in a more exaggerated way. It's a sign of what might be coming to us. And so then you have these other kinds of initiatives that operate on the other end of the spectrum, bringing design to make current solutions more pleasant, or maybe making the efforts of cutting on the broad side more acceptable. And I think we need to think about these two ways of thinking about innovation quite critically. When we think about these big challenges, when I was in government, we led this initiative for carbon cities. If we're thinking about decarbonizing cities, it's not just buildings, it's not just behaviors, it's not just roads. We need to think about embodied carbon, we need to think about the energy that's used, but we need to think about transportation and eating. And so we need to bring those ministries, we need to bring those disciplines to really think about what is the recipe that's going to deliver zero carbon. Right? So while we have a building that we built for this initiative, we were able to use that building as a way to change off-site energy production systems, changed regulations, food systems, roads, and we even changed fire codes in Finland to allow for wood to be used in large-scale construction. Right? So when we do things like a building, we can use them as a Trojan horse to begin to connect the different things in the system that need to be changed. This way of working is something that I've then helped organizations like the UN, in this case UNDP, to deliver a new instrument for development, which is a portfolio, where we can do many different things under a single umbrella and understand their combined effect, not their disaggregated effect. And in addition, to allow, as we discover how we work, to move resources flexibly, not to be in this predictive mode where we're going to tell you what we're going to do in year 5, because these are creative challenges that we need to discover as we do things in the actual real world. And this kind of work requires an architecture of the solution. So this is what I'd like us to sort of think about and what that requires and how we mobilize money, how do we work across organizations, and thinking about all the incentives that make that possible. We find that teams that are housed in different places that work as a unit are that unit that helps create this kind of innovation. Let me run through, just very briefly, if we still have a few minutes, an example that helps then bring that logic of work into a different context. 2004, I led an initiative in the US around healthcare delivery. We looked at strokes, that is a disruption of blood flow to the brain. It's like a heart attack, but for the brain. And we looked at from cradle to grave. We wanted to understand how does that disease path look like and what things is it cut across the healthcare system. And by doing so, thinking about how we could improve overall outcomes for lower costs. At the time, in 1996, there was a drug, the first drug for stroke that was approved. It's called TPA. And basically stated that if you gave this drug within 3 hours, there was an opportunity to create a kind of better outcomes in patients. Right? So a whole system was geared towards delivering this drug to patients within 3 hours. And when I was working on this, everybody thought that the system was fine. It was just a question of process improvement. How do we get patients more quickly to the hospital? Right? And a lot of policies were driven, a lot of political will was spent on getting people to go to the hospital quickly. Like with the urban development project, we needed to work across many domains and many different kinds of expertise. So I want to take this very complex endeavor and just focus it on one of the many questions we had, to show you how we as designers also work in a visual manner to begin to ask new questions. Because by asking new questions, we can find the doors to new creative solutions. So first of all, nobody had ever asked, is the population of the US even within 3 hours of treatment? That's because each state has its own depositories. There is no national depository for it, right? And many other kinds of issues on that. So I hope this video will work, but we created the first sort of map of all hospitals that give stroke treatment. It's basically a drug that dissolves clots in your brain. That's basically what it is. And to give it, you need to have somebody take an image of your brain to make sure that you are eligible for this drug. You have 30 minutes to get to the hospital if you want to work within this 3 hours. Because you get a stroke, it takes time for the ambulance to get there, then there's the 30 minutes, then you're in the ER and there's time and so on and so on. So if you take all those additional times, you have 30 minutes. So this animation, if it works, it will show all the hospitals and it will draw circles at 30 minutes of driving, normal driving, okay? So let's, no, we don't have it, okay. So it's very small, okay? So the idea was that what we realized is about half the population is within treatment if everybody in the US called the second they get a stroke, okay? So that's a glass ceiling. Now, states like Massachusetts realized that the only way to solve this problem is to have more hospitals so that there's more population within it, and that's what they did. And when you run the analysis here, these are miles, but you can think of them as minutes. Within about 10, 15 minutes, you have almost 100% of the population is theoretically within reach. So policy seems to work. The problem here is that you have two areas. That little horn thing is called Cape Cod, and then the area up there is the Berkshires. Not many people live there in the winter, but a lot of people live there in the summer, right? So census data is great when because it counts you where you're at home, but the moment you leave home, it is not very useful. So this made us realize that not only do we need to look our people from a census perspective within reach of care, but what's the effect of dynamic movements of a population. So we said summer is a time when a lot of people leave, and we worked with the Veterans Administration in the US and national parks in the US, and we looked at national parks like Yosemite or Grand Canyon that I guarantee are far, far from any hospital, and we wanted to see how many people go to these places in the summer. A lot of people go. It's like having a city the size of Atlanta that is constantly outside of care, very, very far. The second thing we realized with the Veterans Administration data is that you and I are most likely to have a stroke in the summer. I don't know why, but there's a seasonal peak. So we could begin to ask a question is, when a population is most likely to have a condition, is it also most likely to be out of its own range? I might be in Paris, there's a hospital, but it's a new context. Maybe it's harder for me to know where to go, or I'm in a park. So as a designer, we think of these things not in absolute terms, but to begin to raise new questions at different scales. So this is the last thing, which is very dramatic, but it's not going to be dramatic because there's no animation, but I'll explain it. So these circles that we had done before are Euclidean ways of thinking. It's as if I was a bird and I fly for 30 minutes out, right? Now we know that doesn't work. So we worked with the Department of Transportation to figure out 30 minutes of normal driving, and this thing shrinks to about half. And then we looked at peak traffic, and it shrinks even more. And why is peak traffic important? Because that's the morning rush hour. And why is morning rush hour? It's because it's when you and I are most likely to have a stroke is in the morning. And the reason for that is that when I'm sleeping in bed, I might have some plaque in my body. And when I wake up in the morning, two things happen. My posture changes, and my blood pressure rises. And that combined effect makes it most likely that something will go in your brain, right? So the moment when the population is most likely on a daily basis to have a stroke is when we have most traffic, and this shrinks even more. It's basically about that big, literally, around that. So when we take this back to the national scale, we realize that if everybody in America called the moment they had a stroke, only 10% of the population is even theoretically within reach of care. On a drug that is 12% better outcomes. So we have a glass ceiling of 1.2% of the population ever improving, right? And these are mostly patients that have minor strokes, not major strokes. I won't get into the distinction why. So a lot of these problems that present to us are presented as if they're process improvement or efficiency questions, when in reality they require fundamental structural changes. So I think we're at this moment right now where there's a real urgency to respond, because the less we respond, the more trust we lose in citizenry. This is US trust in government over the years, right? And the more we lose trust, the less opportunity we have to mobilize citizens towards change. And it's a vicious cycle that we are in right now. So I hope this design conversation can get us to that atomic level rather than the cucumber level on this issue. Thank you.
You stay. You had more slides.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
All right, thanks. Then I will put it back because this is confusing. Thanks, Marieke. Thank you so much, Marco. I really enjoyed it again. I've seen a few slides before, but and I wanted to raise the question. You said, okay, there are technical solutions and conceptual solutions, and in that dimension, design plays a role, right? Because if you have a technical solution, you can ask an engineer, and the designer brings in the conceptual reframe, you could say. But you also put up America by Design. So, because the conceptual reframe, that's where the ideology comes in. So within this public design practice, who's responsible for the ideology behind the conceptual reframe?
That's a very good question. I don't know if there is a single owner. I would hope that our governments would represent that. But I think, again, this question of mobilizing people, I think we also, in the different institutions that we operate, or even as citizens, need to reclaim some of that question. Because for me, ultimately, design is always political. You're always having a conversation about what we think will create better life, and that's an ideological conversation. It's not party politics, I want to make that very clear, but it is ultimately an ideological kind of one. I think that the difficulty we're having right now is that we are struggling to create new realities where the promise of a better future is clearly evident to people. So I think from our perspective, and maybe it's going back to your original question or comment you made, I think we need to do things, because by creating new realities, we can change the terms of that debate.
Right.
It's not an
It
intellectual
becomes experiential
conversation.
as well.
Exactly.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I would also like to ask Youssef Louakili to stage. And Youssef is Director Media and Creative Industry at our Ministry of Education, Culture and Science. He is initiator of POND, also an ambassador of design in general, and also increasingly using and applying design within his own policy practices. Give him a warm welcome, Youssef Louakili.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let's have a chair.
Yes.
We have this will also be short, so don't feel offended, Youssef, that it's short. But but we can sit down and relax just a little bit. Because I was just curious, Youssef, if you listen to Marco's story, do you recognize, and especially the possum with the twirling eyes,
Yeah.
do you recognize the high stress context?
Well, absolutely. It's very stressful to work alongside the political dynamics which we are facing day by day. And also, I think a very important element is the public perception that's dominating politics. Public is expecting resilience from government, pace in policy making, and inevitably fast results. And the system is organized in delivering that to politics. So that implicates that it is very difficult to internalize as an institution working for government a work method that combines taking risks, that combines learning by doing, that combines analyzing from different perspectives what the problem really is before starting to think about possible solutions, and that difference in pace does not fit. So we react instantly to politics to make sure that they make the right decisions, or to advise them to make the right decisions. But sometimes it's good to take a step backwards and use different forms of methods, for instance, design thinking. But it is a challenge. So, yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I wanted to just respond, which was maybe what I wanted to. You said there's still a slide, but
There were
question.
few, many.
Yes, this question of a high stress environment.
Yeah.
And I think the public sector is increasingly a high stress environment. We have diminishing resources, and we're asking it to do more with less.
Yeah.
And I think if you think of it purely from I'm not a brain expert, but so that warning be held. But if you think of it from a brain perspective, those are probably the conditions that are least likely to make people creative, right? So that's another cognitive dissonance, is we have institutions that are high stress. We have like two kinds of brains. We have human brains and lizard brains. And the lizard brain is when you go into fight and flight mode. You cannot control that. It's not something you can mentally control it. So we have people who are increasingly in a lizard mode, being asked to do things that requires the brain to be more expensive, right? And I think when we think about design in the public sector, that first and foremost we should think about designing the environment.
Yeah.
How do we design the environment to allow people's brains to relax, so that they're most capable of doing that creative kind of work? And sometimes I think teaching skills can be counterproductive, because you're asking somebody who is in a lizard mode, and you're asking them to do even more on that. So I don't know, maybe it's a half question I have, is what are then the strategies that we can create that human brain creative environment in an institutional context that's increasingly a lizard brain mode?
So you're comparing us with lizards.
No, take no offense. I'm a
No,
lizard
absolutely
too.
not. Because I think you're very. Actually, it's a great point. I think we have to do it by different ways. We are feeling right now the urgency within the Dutch government by let's say, the board of the different ministries who are trying to push forward this type of method. They are embracing PONT. We took different issues, policy issues, to experiment with policy making by design. And I think the essence is learning by doing with design thinking. We have also in our onboarding programs tried to learn also these skills, which is of course the base. The policymakers are very common with science and how to analyze scientific papers and put them in policy making, but in terms of how to think in terms of designing is not the prime focus of many policymakers. So that's the thing we have to do. But foremost, I think we have to do this together with politics. I think we have to make sure that politicians, and we have to think positive from that part. We have to embrace politics as a vehicle that can adapt design thinking to win trust of the public. And the essence is examples. Showcase your examples. Make sure that people see the successes, and there are some successes also in national politics when it comes to using design thinking.
And do you then also mean that in executing or performing this public design practice, we need to engage with politicians, so that also creates the space and the openness to be creative and to learn? Is that,
I think,
because that's something, right? That would be
great. I think we can start, and we also already have that dialogue with politics when it comes to the importance of creative industries in the economic autonomy of our country, economic resilience of our country.
Yeah.
But also to make sure that they understand that when they want to create concrete methods or solutions for people, they need to think from their perspective, and design thinking is a clear method to do that. And that's
yeah. And if we, because you said, okay, the unit of sort of analysis, the cross-departmental teams, that's where the collaboration needs to happen, and then the institutions needs to see how to support that. I was wondering, Youssef, because how difficult do you find, or how easy does it go to work with different departments on cross-departmental topics and issues?
I think I have
Is
to
that a difficult question?
give the political correct
Okay,
answer.
I will
right
lean
now.
back now.
Of course, it is challenging, but it's not challenging because people don't want to cooperate.
No.
It's challenging because people feel a lot of responsibility and have a lot of expertise when it comes to their own subject. When it comes to the threat from the Russians, you mentioned it already. People want to be practical when it comes to resilience or whatever, and then to put forward design thinking and as an option to tackle that kind of problems. People are in a hush to fix things and are also under political pressures, but mostly I find it also very hopeful that departments are much more open in experimenting with new methods.
Yeah.
So I'm not very pessimistic when it comes to the future.
Yeah, nice. But this responsibility is key, right? That you feel a department has a particular responsibility, and that's driving actually the actions, maybe more than learning what works collaboratively to an issue. So what would be your advice in that regard?
So here are a few points, and maybe some will go directly to that and some won't. First of all, I think if we think at the political level, I think most politicians are well-intentioned, but they don't always understand the unintended consequences of their decisions, right? And so then we create problems at some level. I think as the world is becoming more and more volatile, that's going to become increasingly important. So I think that's why I show this kind of funnel. I think we need to be involved as a way to at least help make connections between the known and the unknowns, so that the political conversation can be more aware of the potential unintended consequences, right? Because
Yeah.
you can't just be at the bottom end,
Yeah,
where it usually
sure.
happens, where we're then trying to solve the wrong kind of brief. So that would be sort of one thing that I would say. The other thing I would just say, just broadly speaking, is that while there is collaboration that happens, and I speak just from the Finnish government perspective, it tends to be at the lower levels. And so it then tends to be focused, and it's already quite fragmentary, the kind
Yeah.
of work that happens. And so it has very little opportunity to have strategic impact. So I think while those practical issues need to be done, I think the higher level, more abstract conceptual work needs to be also seen as practical. I think we fool ourselves in thinking that practical is a nail, but a new idea or a new way of framing is not practical. If we think of Finnair, our national airline, that conceptual reframe was super practical. It led to a whole different way of looking at it. So that would be. And then maybe the third thing to do is that when we resource innovation and we create the environment, I have this rule of thumb, which you can say is wrong, but that new things take about 7 times more time than known things. So if we're trying to do something the first time, it's going to take us 7 times more time than if it becomes a routine. And so if we're asking these teams to step out of their norms and to do new things, then we need to also acknowledge that that's going to take more resourcing, right? And that's sort of complicated. So changing the resource logic, using design as a way to help manage volatility at a political level, and then helping connect to the kind of practical work, to the political practical work, those kinds of connections I draw at least.
Nice.
Nice,
Because
yeah.
what you also mentioned was this portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned the budget for the healthcare system reform, and you said it's spread out in little budgets across these departments or different organizational units. But wouldn't that also be okay if that were the small practices that then collaboratively in this strategic portfolio setting would be united or somehow
Yeah,
connected?
I mean, I think theoretically, but that's not happening.
No.
And so a lot of well-intentioned work is adding up to nothing, really.
Right.
Sometimes a good thing here is working against another good thing over there. A lot of good ideas aren't always a great idea. So then we need to resource that. We need to sort of figure out, and how do we make sure that this great idea influences the great idea that's happening here? We're not making these connections. So
Yeah.
we're not thinking of the institutional framework for the institutional, for it to be a learning institution. We don't have the learning
Right.
mechanisms.
The learning
We have reporting
infrastructure.
mechanisms
Yeah.
that we pretend is learning.
Yeah.
But learning is in people, not in paper. And so we need to think about how people move and work with each other.
I totally agree with
Yeah.
that, of course. Learning is very important, but
Yeah.
I do think I have to. I think your analysis is very strong, and but I see a tendency towards also that the higher level, senior level at government, directors general, secretary generals, are taking their responsibility in endorsing this method and trying to analyze problems from a multidisciplinary perspective. I think that's a good first step to start from. Yeah.
Thank you. I need to wrap up in heads of time, but I want to thank you once more, Youssef Louakili and Marco Steinberg. Give
Thank
them a hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Well, then we have to come. We come to the end of the first part of this session, and unfortunately, I have to let you know that Lucy Kimbell cannot join today due to illness. Luckily, though, we recorded videos of these keynote speakers, so also from Maiko and also from Christian, but also from Lucy. So you can visit our website, and then you can still learn from her insights as well. So welcome back again. And as an intermezzo between our two keynote speakers, we now move over to Dutch design, because it's Dutch Design Week after all. With me on stage joined Reinoud Tiekstra, Costanza Milano, Björn van Rij and Malik Mohammed. Give them an applause. And they join me because they all represent a specific public design practice. And what I would like to reveal in this session that there can be many forms of design that sit within public design practices. And there are also many multiple organizational settings in which public design practices can arise. And of course, we will also highlight a little bit how they all help to transform to a more responsive government. We start with you, Reinoud, and I'm also the clicker, so on it. You're a civil servant, but also a designer working on the Clustering Rijksincasso program. And that's an initiative aimed at helping the government collect debt in a more socially responsible manner, which means that they want to make sure that people don't fall below the poverty line. Because many citizens who have uncontrollable debt oftentimes have debt with multiple public organizations. And to have to deal with different payment procedures, different portals, the complexity can even increase, so that debt also increases. Clustering Rijksincasso brings together the 8 largest public service organizations in the Netherlands to tackle this challenge. And through design, the program is creating the next generation of public services. Simpler, more coordinated, and more supportive for citizens. Reinoud, this is a Clustering Rijksincasso, but this is especially what you are working on. And I'm very curious because you want to really bring in this perspective of the user, and address their needs in this payment situation. So what would you say is the biggest accomplishment you have achieved in this program so far?
Especially redesigning a new public service. The biggest achievement in this service is significantly reducing the complexity in dealing with the government by a citizen. So we did a lot of user research, and citizens always ask for an overview. What is my situation? What's the context? So you start with an overview of your invoices and payment arrears you have with the government. But to get this overview, now you have to deal with all these organizations individually. But we've made a service where you can ask all these organizations at once, and in a matter of seconds they give you an answer and get an overview of your invoices and payment arrears. And you need this overview to know what your options are, to pay, if you can't pay, if you can get a collective payment plan, or if you get a phone number for somebody to call. To decrease the administrative burden of citizens, that's the biggest achievement.
So the overview, but also the simplicity perhaps in getting insight in the payment procedures, that's then...
Yeah, we're going to add that next. This is the foundation,
yeah.
But collective payment plans, easy way to pay or to come in contact with somebody by the government who can help you. We're going to add those services in the coming years.
All right, and so this actually is a portal you put before these 8 other public service organizations. I can also understand that that's a challenge to bring them all on the same page. You probably, is this running? This is actually currently downloadable, or is it still a prototype?
It's always running.
Okay.
No. We built all the components of the service, but there is a legal track we have to finish. So
a legal track?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
We need an ANVB.
Okay, now I exactly know what you mean.
And you have to activate this service, and therefore you need to use DigiD.
Yeah.
And so to be able to use DigiD to activate this service, you need an ANVB, and the policy people at the Department of Interior are working on that. And we need to get all these components to a production environment.
All right. So, But can you maybe then, because I think what value is of design in this case also is that it becomes concrete and a prototype and people show how it might work. Can you explain or elaborate a little bit how that helps to also maybe touch upon these legal constraints or these processes you need to initiate, but also the collaboration between these 8 parties?
Yeah. Yeah, all these public service organizations are used to developing their own public services and add them to their own portals.
Yeah.
They know they need to get an overview like this. They have to give up some control. They're not used to giving up that control and get the control to the programming our project and to this public service. So it takes a long time. You called it. It takes something to do something new. It takes 7 times longer than to something that is already established. So, we need to build up trust by at these public service organizations. So we run all kind of experiments, and as the assumption we have, we try to fit it in an experiment or build a prototype to validate those assumptions. And so everybody, the citizens, we co-design this service with citizens, but also with all these partner organizations. They can see the whole development process, and they can give feedback. Everything is open and transparent. All the code is open source. All the insights we gather from user research, they can see that in demos, in tech inspiration days. We work together in a Slack-like environment.
That's allowed to use Slack? Or Slack-like?
Yeah, Slack-like.
Okay.
So, in the collaboration with all the public service organizations, we experiment and find the way so we can't. So they can see how we work. They can give input, and slowly but surely we build up trust. And so they next year when we want to go live, they feel assured. So, okay, we're part of this public service. We are needed.
Yeah.
But it's different from what they're used to.
And you're a program, and to my knowledge, programs are always temporary organizational structures. But actually, you build up a way of working collaboratively with different public organizations. So, what would your hopes be to the future? Would you think this would be a permanent structure, or do you hope to vanish and that they can continue on their own?
I hope this.
What do you think is feasible, perhaps?
I think you can build all kind of new public digital services on the template we have developed. So
yeah. So we can continue. That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Absolutely. Not only for debt relief or debt collecting, but also when it comes to on the income side. Or student finance. I'm seconded from the education agency, executive agency, so I work there on student finance. You could do that at the same.
Yeah, and if you include all the governments, because you can also have a debt with governments, right? So then you have 345, I learned, governments to include in your work as well.
Yeah, this is the first phase. These 8 partner organizations, but we're already working on a next phase to connect all the municipalities, water boards, and the government agency who are not part of these the first 8.
Super nice. Thank you. Give him a hand because it also feels so. Then we move over to Costanza, who works at the design agency Reframing Studio. And I invited her on stage because already in 2004, Reframing Studio helped shape a vision for Ministry of Interior and Kingdom relations on how citizens and government interact. And they showed that they can move really from transactional efficiency also to more relational legitimacy. And that same approach is still alive today in Costanza's work with the municipality of De Bilt, where they guided a coalition of local partners, from housing corporations to police, to fundamentally rethink how they collaborate across areas like health, safety, and resilience. Costanza, it sounds super great, relational legitimacy. And I'm very curious to learn what design can do to establish that, but perhaps first can you help us understand what it means, relational legitimacy?
Yes. So first of all, it's working, right? Yes. Okay, so it's two questions in one. So I start maybe by defining what we're talking about first, and then we look at design.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, we're talking about the relation between citizen and government, or more broadly, institution. It could also be private institution, for what it matters. And what is so delicate about that relationship is the process of legitimization, which is it means it's the process through which citizens give permission to the government to act on their behalf. So it's basically the moment when you say, I trust the government enough to take a decision and do things that ultimately will have an impact on me. And sort of traditionally, or more often, I think, governments, and not just the Dutch government, but they try to strengthen that process, so build trust through efficiency. So making things super efficient, making sure there are no mistakes, that everything runs smoothly, there is no, room for error, and that definitely has a space and a place, and it's important. But efficiency alone does not build trust, and not in every context or in every environment. So, and that's because, in a way, people don't judge the government just by what the government delivers, but also how do they experience what the government is delivering. So how does the government behave in relation to me? So is it, so what kind of relationship then I have with the government? And then the relationship needs to kind of feel right, and what feels right is not always the same, of course, so it's not like one solution to fit all. And you might want, in one moment, a government that you have a relationship and you feel the government is protecting me. Or maybe, in another occasion, you want something completely different. You want a government that lets you run free and it doesn't restrain you and you can do whatever you want. Or it supports you, empower you, you get the idea. And so it's kind of situational. You don't want to have the same relationship with the government in every moment. And what I'm trying to say is not, oh, we should try to make everyone happy all the time. That's not potentially realistic. Also, people have a different preference of what kind of relationship they want to have with the government. That's also political preference, so you can't say everyone wants the same. But what you can do, and what we found out in that project, I mean, I wasn't working at the time, but also since then, is that what it is important is that it's the government is very much aware of what kind of relationship it wants to build. So the intention is very clear, and not just is clear, it's communicated clear, and then it's also translated and it mirrors the experience that the citizen is having. So the moment in which those two don't match, then it's when you have a break in trust or like an issue in the relationship with the government. So, for example, if I have the government that is promising me to have a service that will empower me to do something, and then I end up experiencing a service that makes me feel crushed and controlled and kind of toned down, that's like not the interaction. Yeah, that's the interaction is wrong. Yeah. And it feels wrong. And that's when, to go back, design can help. Yeah. Because design comes in quite strategically then, because that's what we do. Design makes relationship very visible, and we work in, we're trained for it. So we work with interactions. So what we do is that we can make it so concrete, so explicit, and so that it's discussable, and then you can work with it with people, and you can make choices that are deliberate and that feel right.
So what you're saying is, depending on the context that people are in, they might expect different things from our government, and you need to reflect that back in the way they interact with their services.
Yeah, but maybe what I'm saying is not even just we have to, what I said before, so it's not about finding out which one is the relationship right in every context, but it is a political choice. So you have to be very explicit in the type of relationship that you want to build, and then making sure that the experience of the people mirrors that.
Is according.
And that's what we do. So as design, we align yeah, that's what it can help with, I think.
Right.
It helps aligning the intention, the communication of it, and then the experience that you have. That's kind of the core of a design process. Definitely in our studio, our methodology, but you start by defining the meaning that you want to have. So what is the intention? And that's the design brief, and then you give form to it.
Right. And
So,
if you
yeah.
then, because I want to move to this project
Yes.
you're working on yourself, that's in the municipality of the Bild.
Yes.
That's working with a coalition of different
Yeah.
partners.
Yeah.
How does this legitimization process, or perhaps this meaning of you want to achieve to citizens, how does that play a role in this?
Yeah, so this project, so Bilto is a municipality in, Bilto is a municipality in
Are you
near
making notes?
Utrecht.
Sorry, Costanza. Yeah.
It's okay, I continue.
Yeah.
Basically, we were called in to guide them into rethinking the way of working between all the local partners. So from the municipality, the police, the social housing, what you said before,
the housing corporations.
healthcare providers and so on. Dutch is taking over my English, that means something. Basically, what was interesting here, that's why also I chose it, is because the relationship that we were looking at was not just the relationship with the neighborhood, but also the relationship between all the parties. And that's something that I think is quite recognizable in different municipalities that we worked with. That's a relationship that it's challenging,
Right.
because everyone comes in, it's what you were mentioning also before, that everyone comes in with their own way of working, their own frame of reference, and also institutional boundaries. And so how do you make that work? How do you create a collaboration that works and reflects, and that's what we help them with, reflecting their intention into then the actual form of the collaboration. And here the picture that you see, kind of. So it's a bit later in the process. So we started, and now making it simple, but we started by asking every organization to come up to share the values that are important in their work. So what do they want to achieve, and in which way and in which context. Then we created a shared value manifesto, let's say, and we made a ambition kind of plan, so objectives, and this can be like still quite vague. So for example, one was that they wanted to build a new relationship with the street, because they had safety issues and people were not feeling safe in the streets, and so it was quite negative, the relationship, and there were issues of social cohesion and so on. So that's kind of the level. So it's quite actionable already,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it's not yet one solution. And then we, here it's a simulation, so we came up with 5 different hypothetical cases of situations that might happen in the neighborhood. And they had to simulate their response as a coalition. So first they mapped it out by themselves about like how it would respond on all different levels. So high level, what is the who is on the lead? How do you communicate? When do you start? In which location? Everything. And then we introduced again the shared ambitions, and we used them to change the way they were collaborating.
Nice.
And it really was so clear how, by making it explicit, it changed fully the way they interact. And now we made a roadmap and then implementation and so on.
Nice.
But this worked really, really well.
Nice.
And maybe to conclude, because I know we need to move on, but I think that's also what a design methodology can do, is that it's so, at least definitely the reframing methodology we use is quite structured. So it really guides the people step by step. And I think that sometimes creativity outside of the creative world, it's something that feels that only talented people can do. And it's also something that, it's always described like you have an idea, like you're walking on a field and then you see a bird
comes to
passing.
you.
Yes, you know, like, oh, now I know how to fix democracy. And that's not how it works.
No.
You have to train that. And it's really, really nice to see that a methodology can train an organization, because I believe in talent, yes, but I do believe in knowledge. And the people that work within the context have a lot of knowledge, so you
Right.
do want that.
But wouldn't you say that also because so Reinout is situated within the government, that in this case it's also quite nice that you come in as a neutral partner in this coalition to
Definitely.
guide that process, right?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
also a
definitely.
value.
That's
of,
also what I love to do. Otherwise, yeah, I would probably work somewhere else. But
Yeah.
I do think there is a lot of value in that neutrality. And also, I mean, we are trained to do this, so we do have an eye for understanding what opportunities are and
Right.
helping out and translating
Yeah.
the conversation. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
indeed, we need to move on. Give her. Björn, welcome, Director of Design Agency Zeewaardig. And you had the opportunity to work with our Ministry of Finance on the recovery effort following the Dutch childcare benefits scandal. Yeah, and for the few international guests here today, the scandal involved the wrongful suspicion of fraud against 40,000 people. Combined with strict policies and rigid enforcement, it caused harm far beyond financial harm. It led to deep social and emotional distress with people. And the Van Dam Committee's report, with the title Promise Less, Do More, called for a more human-centered approach and recommended simplifying the confusing compensation routes from 5 down to 2. And your role was to design one of these streamlined paths called My Recovery. And you had to work closely with the affected citizens. Björn, this is quite a impactful process, right? I mean, the government wants to recover the process and the relationship with these affected people. And I wanted you to reflect on what does design and co-design or participatory design brings in such a recovery operation?
Thank you. Let me assure you, there's actual people inside that building. Because I've seen 3 pictures of government buildings without people, but and you can also there's also an entrance to the right, so you can also enter the building.
Enter the building.
No, so yeah, it was intense. As a parent myself, I was flabbergasted. I mean, you cannot comprehend what these people have been through. At the same time, it's also very humbling and at the same time energizing that you can be sort of a conduit or a translator of emotion and lived experience into a policy. And I was asked to redesign one of these processes regarding additional damages or reimbursing these. And so they were started out with, can you make a customer journey and a service blueprint of the process? We quickly moved towards a more co-creative process, like you said. And I think on 3 levels, we could make a difference. And one is trust. The second is that we allowed to create a mutual kind of empathy. And the third is action based on evidence. And for the first, I think the basis of the whole crisis is, of course, distrust. A systematic distrust of people, and I think one of the most important steps in this whole situation is to regain some kind of trust. And I think co-creation is a way, if you do it right, if you do it in a considerate way, is a way to actually achieve that, because there is room for stories of both sides. There's room of different perspectives. There's also room for talking about the systemic limitations. And if you actually manage to give proof back to these parents that their interaction and the co-creation leads to change, then I think you set kind of a base level for regaining some of that trust.
And can you then, because I know when I explain about participation to governments, they're like, yeah, but we are, 80 million people at the moment, they cannot all participate. And in this case, there were also 40,000 affected citizens. So can you explain a little bit how you translate this regain of trust that you can co-create with only a limited number of people to then perhaps also what Costanza mentioned, the qualities of the interaction in this streamlined path? How does that bridge?
Well, first of all, it's a lot about taking time, and so in the conversations you have to find the time to really understand what's happening. Then again, you also don't want the parents to live through it again. So you have to strike a balance there. I think what I said earlier is, I think, as a designer here, you function as an intermediate or someone who is the one who represents the parents at the table, in this case in the ministry. So you bring the stories, you bring the insights, but you also make you make design interventions, and you produce ideas based on what you learn, and then you fit them into the system. So I think it's a way of, like I said before, like being an intermediary between the outside world, which is very emotional, where there's also very individual cases, each important, each very intense. And I think as a designer, you can sort of take out some of that emotion that sits in the way of actually generating solutions. And at the same time, you're also with one foot within the ministry. So understanding legal requirements, understanding that you have to build something that actually can process 40,000 people within 2 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a challenge.
Yeah, and I wanted to reflect upon that a bit further, because as designers in public design practice, you enter such high stress context, and this was, I would say, even an extremely high stress context. There were a lot of media attention, political expectations and pressure, and indeed these legal and financial constraints. So can you just share a moment in which you felt, okay, now I have to really step up my game to as a designer in this context?
There's many, but I'll pick out one. At some point, it seemed as though the discussion was really about like very high level abstract policy things, whereas on the other hand, there was a lot of stress and pressure on getting things done. And so there was a lot of discussion also, which was, I think, based on assumptions that were not vocalized. And it's just simple, but at some point we printed the poster on a 7-meter sheet of paper, presented it to senior staff and the minister, and the dynamic shifted directly, because there was like something which was actual. There was kind of a single
reference.
Single reference where you could actually touch and walk towards. So that's what people did. They walked towards that piece of paper and said, well, does this actually work with our legal constraints, or can we actually fit this within the digital the digital
so a little bit the prototyping that Reinoud talked about as well.
Yeah,
Make
but
it
and from that point on, I think process started to move much faster, because we were talking about the same thing instead of talking about long policy documents, which I don't think are the best way to reflect complex processes like this, especially in a stress environment like this.
Yeah. Now, coincidentally, we have the program director of the recovery program here with us, Dennis van Bremen. Give him an applause. Can I have the other mic? And I just wanted to, come. You can indeed, it's a little bit weird to speak with your back to the audience. I wanted just to hear your experience. What was it like to be engaged in a design-driven approach like this?
Well, I think Björn already emphasized it quite well. The process really brought neutrality. I think the Dutch childcare scandal brings a lot of sensitivity in every discussion you have with parents, with families. And I experienced that the design approach really brought this neutrality, a new language on which you could focus to find solutions, and that was a real help to come further.
So would you say that's also a little bit that conceptual reframe that we talked about, like how to look at this together and then find new words, but also new language then indeed.
New language, be able to talk about constraints, legal or other constraints in a way that are not offensive, and that really brought us further.
Nice. And what would you do? I mean, you also learned. I think he had to step up your game. You probably had to step up your game. What would you do differently, perhaps next time, or what did you learn that you say, okay, next time I will work with designers, I'm gonna do this differently then?
Well, maybe two.
Two. Yeah, bring it on.
Only two,
Yeah.
no, at least two.
Yeah.
One, we discovered that we had a minister which had quite a hands-on mentality, and we also discovered that bringing this minister into the process really helped the political decision-making, and I think that's
interesting.
great value.
Yeah.
And the other one is halfway the process we had to scale up and speed up the process, and that led to some kind of discontinuity, which was really difficult because you build up something with this group of parents and lawyers and other people involved, and that's something I would pay more attention to.
Yeah, because you mean discontinuity because you had to let go of that intimate practice and bring it into the system.
Because we had around last summer, we had to really speed up and scale up, and that brought new people around the table.
Right.
So the process and more or less the rules we agreed upon changed, and that was more easy for us probably than for the parents involved.
Right.
So that's really something to take into account.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Give him an applause. Thank you, Björn, for and I think we touched upon user experience and service design, more strategic process design. This was really co-create, and of course they're all strategic and co-creative. But we lit out.
Can I make one more addition?
Yeah.
And maybe in the light of all the suffering here, talking about something like implementation risk is something that feels secondary, but I think the whole empathy action and the fact that we worked on trust, it actually de-risks a project like this, because and I think that's an important value as well.
What do you mean with de-risk?
Because you start implementing something that you actually know is rooted in reality and that is tested, and I think that makes moving forward and deciding to move forward much easier when you actually have that proof that it works, but also that the process itself also worked with the people that you're working for.
Yeah, and builds the legitimacy we also touched upon earlier. Yeah, thanks. Then we move to Malik. I have a very nice introduction. At a time when cities are facing complex transitions and many citizens feel alienated from decision making, an experiment was born 5 years ago on the Schiedamseweg in Rotterdam, the Night Shop. On one hand, a simple neighborhood shop. On the other hand, the workspace of design agency Concrete Blossom. And over time, the Night Shop evolved into a living laboratory, a place where the lived experience of citizens are translated into strategies for a more resilient and future-proof city. Where most research institutes view the city through hard data and spreadsheets, the Night Shop understands it through the hairdresser's chair, the shop counter, and the conversations neighbors have while doing their groceries. It's a design research center and an approach that directly fuels policy making. And to illustrate that, I want to also go to ABI 2.0, because that's a project that connects all the tailors in Rotterdam into a singular circular fashion ecosystem. From fabrics made entirely from recycled materials through local workshop where automation enables production, to cost models that outline the system needs. And the result is policy advice you can literally feel and wear. Malik, thank you. What do you think? Because this is...
Well, you said it all.
I said it all? Yeah, okay, this was it.
Just a mic drop. That's it.
No, I think I want to raise a more overarching question for your practice. What do you think is the power of design in fostering a more responsive governance?
Let me grab my notes.
Yeah, okay, you're allowed.
As in, because I could easily tell the story of imagination and working with from lived realities, but I actually tried to make some notes. I'm sick, by the way, so if my voice skips, that's the reason why. I made some notes to actually tie what it is we do to other points that were made earlier.
Right.
Because one thing that I notice in the work we do is that we inspire a lot, but when people leave the room, they actually can't, they ask, what did I experience?
Yeah.
And that's a conscious decision, but in this phase, the plan is to make it more readable for professionals and audiences like these. And see, the Nynke Tromp is disguised, is an R&D center that's disguised as a corner store and barbershop, and it's situated in a high stress environment, as you mentioned. It's the scandal we talked about just before. Some people consider it a feature, not a bug. That's how society works. That's how the relationship between citizen and government is structured, through distrust, through control. And one could say that Delfshaven, where the lowest turnout at an election ever was recorded, is ground zero for democracy. And and that ground zero could also be viewed as a new public management dystopia, where the distance between those who govern and those who are governed is quite clear. And it's important to stress that fact, because we made a conscious decision to position our practice there, because the canaries in the coal mine produce knowledge. The canaries in the coal mine produce understanding. So what if there would be knowledge infrastructure in the fringes of society that can actually harness that knowledge that is produced, and it's you can view it from this quite critical perspective, but you can also view it from a fly perspective, because the Nynke Tromp is also an MPC. We work through hip hop as a methodology. I see someone nodding there.
What's an MPC?
Who understood what I just said?
No.
Raise your hands, please.
Oh.
Thank God. we're getting somewhere. It's if you don't understand it, but you're interested, you can. I give keynotes as well, so we can dive into the world of what it means to sample, remix, work with lived realities, and create things that make sense, but are also fly. And AB 2.0 is an example of such a thing, such a project. Maybe we can get into that later. But what was your question, actually?
Yeah.
I was trying to recall it, but
no. Well, I think because you're a design research center, so I was wondering, you're also a shop. And there is a policy inspiration out there that's output, but what is the design element? What makes you the intermediary between the neighborhood and in this case municipality of Rotterdam?
Because everyone was actually talking about several people mentioned design thinking, right? And using design as to harness ideas and translate and synthesis. But the question is, what is your source material? What are the building blocks that you're working with? And that's, what are you sampling? And what we view as in an MPC, let me give a brief one. An MPC is a drum machine that you can load with records, LPs, chop them up, and make new music with it. Quite circular, right? And the Nynke Tromp functions as an MPC, and it's because it's an archive of lived realities. And what I find interesting of fusing hip hop or the culture, which we actually, I needed more slides to tell the whole story.
He wasn't allowed to. Sorry, my bad.
And but I think in 2023 we developed an advice with UNESCO, the innovative powers of the culture, that was handed to voormalig staatssecretaris van OCMW, and that report is taking the policy realm by storm. All different types of municipalities are making space for people, consultants of the culture, but what are we talking about actually? What are the definitions that we use? So what we try to do is fuse design methodologies and use existing methodologies in the fringes of society, such as hip-hop, to create fabric like you see there. That's Nakor, by the way. Shout out Nakor in the audience, please. Put your hands together.
Whoop, whoop.
On his left shoulder, you see Lebara, if you can recognize it. Is for those who know. And this fabric is an attempt to translate the visual language of the buurt, the ends, the cité, the hood, into a garment that actually speaks to this context where these canaries live, right? And so what design does, and using the right source material, is that we don't need to explain nothing to the people that we're actually focusing on. And because it's participation and design thinking is well-intentioned, but I hope we can get to the tussenruimte in a second. But it takes time to ask people, what is it you want? It takes time to articulate what it is that you need. So what if there would be a night shop, an R&D center, situated in all Schiedamse wegs, all types of shopping streets, where that lived reality is constantly synthesized. And that builds trust, because people walk into the shop with all types of questions and briefs. Oh, that football pitch is getting demolished. Y'all need to do something about it. Because there's a trust there. Mm-hmm. And people literally bring stuff for us to exhibit in the shop, because they intuitively understand what this archive means, what should be included, and what not. And we have pictures of people bringing stuff. And that shows you what the importance is of being able to reflect, not just reflect lived realities, but be embedded within those realities, and then design.
But what I really like is because you say they trust us, right? But you want them to be part of democracy again, so that they trust also the municipality and the government again. So what interplay or what kind of interaction do you need with the government to establish that?
Sorry. Marco was talking about, and everyone understands it, the way the government is structured with all independent organizations and those silos. As long as I can remember, I've been hearing about ontschotting, and now it's called domeinoverstijgend werken, and etc. Okay, and but what we notice is the last couple of years we've been doing a whole lot R&D work for the municipality of Rotterdam. Are there people in Rotterdam in the building? Ah, and Rotterdam as a proeftuin, as in the forefront.
Yeah,
Sorry?
front runners.
Front runners of society. We've come to learn how the municipality and civil servants, what their realm is about, and beyond the cliches of the ambtenaar, right? And there are loads of, I'm not sure if it's loads, there are a significant amount of civil servants that are actually trying to do the hup barba truc continuously and do others, try to make things possible. But there is a kennisachterstand within...
you mean despite the organization? That's what you mean,
Despite
right?
the organization, yes. And there is I'm consciously going to use these Dutch words because there's a connotation to them. There's a kennisachterstand, is een taalachterstand within professional communities, hooggeleide mensen, that don't know how to navigate through society at large. So what we try to be is we move in what we call the tussenruimte, and that's a liminal space that we organize, remixed and sampled and flipped into an organizational tool where all different types of life worlds and value systems and ideologies can we go back to the last slide?
But we need to.
Yes,
wrap
yes.
up.
Really, really.
Yeah. Okay.
Because this now it becomes poetic.
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
And in that in-between space, it's a space for not just translation, but also negotiation. And this is where it gets poetic, because you see to the right, or to your right, yes, there's an image of Bospolderplein where we drew out the tussenruimte. And we can and everyone has an understanding of what an in-between space could be, and to have balance out different value systems. But what I find interesting is that we can learn through what squares such as Bospolderplein mean. Because it's on these squares that the last 20 to 30 years, a whole new identity emerged through play, through kids that have been remixing and sampling each other's roots and creating this new hybrid identity, a third culture, called being a Rotterdammer these days. So which is interesting is that if we're talking about better governance by design, we can learn from what happens at these squares. We can learn from the collages that these shops are. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for giving it that shot. Please, you can rejoin the audience. Thanks. And I thought we were quite... we had quite some time, but we're already behind schedule again. So, but now for our final keynote, Christian Bason. He's co-founder, Transition Collective, and adjunct professor at the University of Technology in Sydney. He actually flew just in from Sydney. As former director of Mind Lab, a governmental design unit that sat within, let's say, 3 ministries and the municipality of Copenhagen, but also as an academic into the field of public sector innovation, Christian is highly knowledgeable on the organizational conditions required for public design practices to thrive. I'm honored he's here to join us, and I'm very happy he made it. Give him a warm hand, Christian Bason.
Thanks so much for having me, and I think one sort of thread through the very, very interesting stories we've heard this morning is that in order to create human services and human interactions, we have to have human government. And the question is, how do we get that? At the same time, we of course have to have government that also plays by the types of principles that is good bureaucracy, transparency, accountability, democratic accountability, some degree perhaps even of predictability. But as one senior civil servant actually in Australia said, we cannot craft human services with inhuman systems. So we have to address the system. Now, we've already heard about the complexity and the challenges we're facing in the public sector and public problems. Just to say that that's, of course, in some degree not new. As Walter Lippmann wrote in 1926, the hardest problems are the public problems. But there is still maybe something changing. Society seems to be accelerating, seems to be morphing and transforming in new ways. Technologically, certainly, but also in terms of maybe the mix of cultures and value systems we have that we just heard about in our societies. When I was director of Mind Lab some years ago, sitting in between multiple ministries with this beautifully crafted space, not always with flowers, but for the photographer we had flowers in the mind, which was our symbolic space for co-creation. When I came in 2007, the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Business, who was our chairman of our board, multiple permanent secretaries on the board, he whispered to me right one of the first weeks the following. And you could see this quote as a lot of pressure. But I remember when he said that to me, I actually felt a little bit relieved. because I felt that was a massive license to fail or to innovate and to try things out. And I was pretty sure, I was much younger than I am now, and of course pretty sure of myself that we could of course get at least one success the first year. But I'll get back to why this is, I think, an important part of innovation and bringing design into government, this kind of mandate. So when the boundaries of the problems we face change, we probably need to change with them. And there is a sense, and I think we saw that from the nice poll that Marco did this morning, that there might be a misbalance between the challenges we face and our ability to deal with them. So one of my recent books addressed this, saying that when we see problems and the boundaries of problems shifting and expanding, we may need to expand the bandwidth with which we innovate. And I think that, again, the cases we saw this morning illustrate not only what we already know about service design or strategic design or design thinking in the public sector, but also in ways in which that practice is emerging and needs to evolve because the challenges are evolving. What we haven't talked so much about yet is the question of management or question of leadership in the public sector. And by leadership, I mean more than just being a boss or manager. But I'm kind of curious, how many of you in this room have a management position of some sort over others? All right, almost half. And so part of being a hierarchy or bureaucracy is that we do have some people deciding over other people. Now I'll get back to the challenges of that. But it does cast a light on the role of managers. One manager I spoke with recently who runs, I can say this in this very close and intimate room, runs the social service agency of Denmark, said, well, on almost every parameter, we're going the wrong direction. Even though in one of the world's most affluent countries, we can afford to throw even more money at the problems. So there's something going on where the old tools are no longer working, and not even more resources. We need to find other approaches. And I would say that bringing in a designerly way of working and mindset methodologies really challenges the role of leaders in enabling change. And the reason I spent at some point in my life 7 years writing a doctoral thesis about design and government was my curiosity that typically the success or failure of a project or an intervention, a program, stands and falls with whoever's in charge in government. So what characterizes managers that are in charge and are utilizing, benefiting from, drawing on, interacting with design teams, design processes, what characterizes those that are successful was really the question. And I discovered in that work, that academic work, that design is really a form of management. And one of the best quotes about that is this one from Dick Boland and Fred Colopy, who say that managers, just like designers, and now we're talking about when we're talking about innovation or change, are thrown, this is a philosophical term as well, thrownness into the world, where you actually have to work with situations that you didn't come up with. Maybe the minister did, or maybe the media did, or maybe some citizens came up with a problem, but it's not one that you invented typically, but you have to find an outcome. And you work in a problem space where you do not necessarily have a evidence-based basis for designing solutions, but you still have to move forward. That is sometimes, having been a manager myself, both in government and elsewhere for more than 20 years, sometimes makes me feel a little bit sad, because it's a little bit challenging, but that actually is the condition you find yourself in managing in complex problems. So how can you, in a sense, lead public design, or how can we understand what design can bring to management as a practice? And I would say that the fundamental question is really, are we seeing management or leadership as making decisions between options that are already there? And you can say that that's management as decision making. Choosing and picking from possibilities that are evident or that are presented immediately by your team, or maybe they're coming from even from a senior management or politician. Or are you actually seeing yourself as a manager or as a leader as someone who's crafting and creating more options for decisions to be made. And that you can call that innovation, or you can call that a process of design. So expanding and opening up, diverging, and producing more options for action before we then move and do something. So you could say that managing as designing focuses on the creative process of building decision spaces. And building decision spaces means working in uncertainty. And it also opens up, maybe even makes managers more comfortable with the fact that we are in zones of uncertainty, especially at a time right now where society seems to be moving through quite a lot of turbulence, whether that's opening the news in the morning and seeing what Trump came up with yesterday, or whether it's following home politics, which are quite turbulent in these times. So how do you then navigate through that? And just 3 quick dimensions of that in terms of leading by design. What did I discover in doing the research of what managers do when they successfully interact with design teams? One is that they are ready to challenge their own assumptions. And having the humility and openness to not take a policy brief or their own experience on face value, but being ready to be challenged. That's also why the kind of immersive neighborhood units and teams that we just heard about earlier can be so powerful, because you're allowing citizens to challenge your assumptions. One example in Denmark we worked at when I was director of Mind Lab was exploring how citizens with a serious work injury experience their case management. And the brief was pretty clear: how do we create more efficient case management at a time when it takes 9 months to process an injury case for a citizen? And the Board of the Industrial Injuries in Denmark and the Director General wanted us to sort of help them improve that process. When we explored through intimate conversations and field visits and ethnographic research among citizens, what they were concerned with, they actually didn't care very much about the speed of the process. What they cared about was to be rehabilitated and get a job again and get their lives back after an injury. So 2 totally different frames of the problem. And as the Director General said to me when we presented the findings, that was a little bit of an eye-opener. That the entire purpose of their policy was actually a mismatch with the lived lives of people. Most people, I should say, because of course some did prefer a quick decision, and others would prefer to be on public payment and not get a job again. As one trade union one time reminded me, their members might just want to stay out of the labor market. But most wanted to get back. Another a practice, or another, you could say, behavior among managers engaging in design is the ability to navigate the unknown, or to be comfortable with the discomfort of ambiguity and open-endedness that necessarily is part of an innovation process. One leader led a school, a high school in Denmark, and has had a multidisciplinary team of teachers designing a new curriculum. And the teachers kept waiting for her to intervene and control them and decide what they should do, and she never did. Because in a design process, of course, actually when you co-design, you let the solutions emerge from the process. And they said, well, we thought you're going to control us. And she said, well, no, I didn't. But it was a massive loss of control, but a positive one. And there's no way we are going to get to the kind of radical transformations that, again, our morning survey at least illustrated that some would like to see, if we do not allow for longer periods of loss of control, which is extremely uncomfortable in most organizations, and especially in bureaucratic, hierarchical organizations, and even more so in politically governed organizations. So there are a lot of reasons why we don't like this, but we need to do it anyway. Finally, making the future concrete. We saw already a number of great examples this morning of visualizations, models. Could be user journeys, could be artifacts, could be places and spaces of all kinds that are eliciting both, showing us what the world looks like now perhaps, but also what the world could look like in the future. And that insisting by public managers and leaders to see things, have them being tangible, is another trait in great design work. One collaboration we did was with Explored, was the housing office in New York City that has a lottery that allocates affordable housing to citizens in New York. You can imagine the interest in affordable housing in New York City, in Manhattan, but of course I know also here that's a challenge. It's a challenge in Copenhagen, and using user journeys and visualizations. As a director of strategic planning for the city government said, it's just so powerful to be able to have a different kind of conversation, shared language, shared pictures of what's going on, and also of shared solutions. Now, this is all really nice and wonderful, but we have to remember that the managers that are succeeding in working with design in a government context are often doing it against the logics of the system they're part of. They're bringing humanity and empathy and insight and open-endedness and curiosity and creativity and experimentation into a system that's designed for the opposite. So we may need to take a little bit of a wider look at the system. And we have to remember that innovation teams and labs which have grown, been institutionalized all over the world in thousands of places around the globe, are in a way an attempt to do something that is not enough, right? Because injecting an innovation team or studio inside a government is a way to get part of the way, but to go the full way and also to make those kinds of teams live long. We have to think about the bigger structure and the bigger cultures in which they are placed and whether we can transform them. So just my last few minutes, I would like to just address the question of, first, what do we mean even by leadership? And we don't mean someone telling somebody else what to do, and we don't mean threatening with sanctions or promising a bonus for doing the right thing. What we mean by leadership, of course, is the ability to create followership. If you're not creating followership as a leader, you're just out for a walk alone. So leadership is that process of mobilization, and that can be with colleagues, it can also be with external stakeholders, partners, citizens. Now, as one executive coach once said to me, a test of a really effective manager is how much tension you can hold. Now, the people who are succeeding with innovation and drawing on design in the public sector are dealing with a lot of tension because they're pushing the boundaries of what the system was designed to deal with. And so I think we need to start imagining different organizational designs that make that easier and make it more systemic and strategic, that we do work with design as an inherent natural part of our work rather than as an alien element in our organizations. So we need to somehow make it more possible to lead public design and make it more accessible for many, many more leaders and managers in government. We also need it to, because it's just a waste of human energy and motivation and resources to build pyramid structures where you put so much pressure on a few at the top, and many of you are in the room now, and so little responsibility or expectations to those, you could call it at the bottom or the front line or whatever we want to call it, but there's a mismatch there, that we're not treating everybody as adults that can solve problems closest to where they are. So top executives like my chairman and director or permanent secretary of the Ministry of Business and leading MindLab need to create the conditions, that's in a sense their design challenge, to create the conditions organizationally, culturally, that it is actually possible to create value through design. So that's the top executive or top leadership challenge, in a way also to reform and transform their own roles and own jobs in government. Because organizations, of course, are the way we have inherited, or that's like our innovation as humanity, to solve problems together. And I think Marcus' illustration of what a typical government or private sector, for that matter, organization looks like is a really fine illustration. We have not innovated that structure for 200 years. Since the very, very early days of the Industrial Revolution. How is it we can be so imaginative technologically and so unimaginative when it comes to how we build the ways we are together to solve problems? So a lot of work is going on right now. We are part of some of it around reimagining public institutions and organizations. We'll also host a conference next year about that. But some of the characteristics of what a human-centered or design-oriented organization might look like could be some of this. Ambitious with clear and long-term vision and future orientation, mobilization, let's call it leadership, but at the same time humble enough to know that we cannot address our problems alone. We need to not just involve citizens, but we probably need to involve other sectors of society as well. We need to have a distributed model where we solve problems closest to where they are, so empowered in terms of the frontline workers. Thinking of our organizations as a community of adults, not the parents in the top, kids in the bottom, but adults that are all empowered to work together on meaningful goals. Psychologically safe in terms of being able to make a mistake. And that's what I felt when my chairman said to me, I expect you to make a lot of mistakes, maybe just get one right. You know, that gave me psychological safety to then really try hard to make a lot of mistakes, and we did. And finally, and it's been said many times before, create a learning organization where we always are adapting to the context as we learn along as we go. We did that at the Danish Design Center for a couple of years, publicly funded organization. We created a model where people chose their own leader. People could choose to lead others if they wanted to. Organization where people were free to solve problems closest to where they were. No fixed departments or teams. All these wonderful people were basically set free to pursue our big missions in the organization to a point where we felt we became an organism rather than an organization. There was another way of saying we became a body of humans working flexibly and creatively to solve problems rather than a structure we had to fit into, a place where everybody could belong. Of course, that can be done. I'm not saying it's easy, but there's a really nice agenda cut out for all of you in management positions here today, because of course we can create better models that replace the old ones. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Christian. Yeah, take a seat. We really, so I don't want to offend anyone, but we really have a moment of time now. But Loes, can I ask you to join us once more for a short conversation? Again, I announced it even. But we'll keep it short. We'll keep it short. Oh, you will sit there, then I will join you here.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Christian went to sit down so comfortably, so then I'll join him. We could also do it stand-up because it will be short. I apologize, but I saw you taking some pictures, so I just want to raise the open question. What does the presentation of Christian trigger with you?
Well, I was, photographing the notes because he was telling me what to do, right? So I wanted to keep that in mind. Yeah. No, it was, again, I saw you before, inspiring, because I feel it's a difficult time now to lead in our organization. Also because there's a rationale in the old organization with political responsibility and budgets, etc. So I think it's really hard to combine the old world with what is useful in the new world. And for me, it sort of starts with, well, the example we saw in Rotterdam today, by everybody working in our ministries, knowing what goes on with the people we are working for. It almost sounds like a cliche, but it's so important. If you're working on a subject, I think you can never write about it without having spoken to the person it affects, because it makes such a difference. It's not the same reading a report or speaking to someone. And I think that really can inspire to start co-creating, because it's so necessary to do so. We know that, but still there, as I said in the beginning, there are so many triggers the other way around. And of course, as leaders, we have to, lead the way and enable people to work in a different way. But it's also about ownership in yourself, to promise yourself, I will never write about something I haven't experienced, because we have done so much wrong by not really understanding what we were doing as a government.
But I also want to hear your advice then for us all together, because I also joined, let's say, a new education system for civil servants, and one of the lecture lines is about working with citizens, and they all mention, yeah, but it's working against the grain, right? So we might teach them how, but organizational-wise, it will be swimming against the current. You're in a leadership position. There are civil servants who want this. So can you just give one, let's say, essential thing? Because you say, yeah, go against the grain and just do it. But what's a key thing to shift?
Your reaction reminded me of a time right after the COVID pandemic ended in Denmark, and we all went back to work, and I started driving to work again, and suddenly there was traffic again, and I was sitting stuck in traffic right in the middle of Copenhagen. I was on the phone with someone, hands-free of course, and I was complaining. I was like, there's all this traffic, I'm right in the middle of the traffic, can't believe it. It was so nice during COVID. And then this person I spoke with, he said, but Christian, you are the traffic. So what I want to get at, I mean, you're part of the traffic, right? If you weren't there would be less traffic. So what I want to get at is that everyone in the public sector, and especially those in management positions, high and low, are part of reproducing the current institution we have and the culture we have. And the changes start with every individual decision you make. The managers I researched for the study, my thesis, each of those managers, about 15 different managers, 5 different countries, all working with designers, they had made different decisions. They had chosen to go against that grain, to start carving out a new space. And I even interviewed them 10 years later, 10 years after the first study and research. And every single one of them I spoke to said, I continue to work with designers. No matter I changed my job in a whole different place now, this is still the way to transform the public sector around citizens' needs, present needs and future needs.
Wow, yeah. You wanted to respond?
I just wanted to add, but we also need a political system, right? If we don't have a Dutch design government, it will be, really hard to make sure that we can, because if we then develop or design a proposal that is multidisciplinary and is really and will actually work in practice, we have to have a government that will adopt it, and then we have a parliament that will understand the wholeness of the proposal. And they have their own committees, education, social, physical, the traffic, and we need more broad, so we are now trying, we're getting some of the lessons and we're trying to have in the next period of government more where ministers will be together responsible for big, large themes, and that we hope to inspire Parliament and that they will inspire themselves to have new commissions that are broader in subjects and not again in their own different silos. Domains, because if we are getting it, then we should have a government that is supporting it, and then we should have a parliament that is...
This is a great example of
to really learn the harsh lessons we have had as a government. And I think we can do, but we need really everybody. And also to challenge the way we are working now. We really need everybody to speak up. And I know we are here preaching to the converted. You're interested in this, you are here. And I know a lot of you struggle because I say all these nice things and then you try to do it in your own environment and not everybody is cooperating, right? So I think we have to find ways to really, and we are looking into that with Bond. I'm really happy you're organizing this and working with us to do experiments and see what is needed to really work in a different way, work from, from society, with society, for society.
Great, then I want to maybe finish with one last question that follows up on what you're just saying, because we're indeed preaching to the people who already are slightly on board. These are the front runners, but these are also indeed the leaders within the design sector and leaders within our public organizations. So what, and perhaps you, Christian, you can start and you can maybe add to that, Loes, is what should we address and nurture within ourselves to lead that change?
Yeah, so when I studied how managers work with design and government, I asked them what motivated them to get started. And I found 3 motivations. Okay. So here we go. One was maybe obvious. It was vision. There were some that really dreamt about making things different and were ambitious about their vision and their dream of a better public sector, right? Second was empathy, that they had come across citizens and they actually heard and experienced what they experienced and felt this is something we need to do something about. And the third one was frustration or irritation, that this is just not good enough. They didn't know where to turn, where to head, but they were just frustrated and wanted to try something else out. And many of them were actually, I should say, serially entrepreneurial in the sense they always kept looking for ways, hacks, different ways of doing things. And then when they came across the sign, it's like, this is what we're going to do.
Nice. And you, what you would give, let's say, as an advice to the people in the room?
Yeah, keep challenging me and my colleagues in that we actually have to work in different ways, and that what we say we want to do, that we actually do it. And I feel it as my task to do the same at the political level, to remind politicians, because in the last cabinets was stated both times that they would apply the lessons we had from the disasters of the past, right? And that they would work with the people we're working for, that they would work with the implementation officers and take them seriously. But we had to remind them regularly. And I think we all as civil servants have to stand up for, we can look at things different politically, but we all should stand up for the only way we can do our task is making sure that what is relevant is weighed in the public sphere, in public, in the openbaarheid. And we can only make sure that everything is weighed and seen and considered if we speak to the people we are working for, if we take into account the professional advice of everybody that is working in practice, if we combine the view of society and the experience in society. So I feel it's like our basic task to make sure every perspective is there, and design is one of the ways to do so. So I hope you'll help me do it for the next period, because we need it really bad.
Yeah. Thank you. Give them a hand. So.
See you again.
All right, that leaves me to wrap up this morning and to open the floor to lunch. I want to thank you for your engagement here and also your engagement in the journey we will share ahead. We need each other. Thank you and have a beautiful rest of the day.